Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniel Schiffer. I make videos right here on YouTube all about filmmaking and content creation, so if you're into that kind of thing, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. I guarantee you will not regret it. Today, I'm going to be letting you into one of my big secrets for achieving better gimbal footage, and that is to shoot in 30 frames per second.
In the stillness somewhere above, the city lights, you're falling in love. Still aware, you know it is true. Lucid dreaming over Tokyo.
It's not really much of a secret because I have actually mentioned this before, but there are three main categories that shooting in 30 frames per second will improve in your gimbal work. A rule that I always follow, and I encourage all of you to do this as well: edit all of your footage in a 24 frames per second or 24p timeline, project, or sequence. When you shoot video in 30 frames per second and edit it in a 24 frames per second timeline, you can slow this footage down to 80% of its original speed. What is special about this magic number of 80% is that it does not make your footage look noticeably slow. However, it does slow down your footage just enough that it smooths out or disguises a lot of those subtle bumps, jitters, footsteps, or robotic movements that are typically picked up by electronic gimbals. So that is the first way that 30 frames per second can improve your gimbal work: overall smoothness. This leads us into our second benefit of shooting in 30 frames per second, and that is for dramatic effect. Like I said before, when your footage is slowed down to 80% of its original speed, it doesn't look like your typical slow motion. Rather, your video will still appear to be pretty much regular speed, with a bit more of a romantic flowiness to it. This is more of a subconscious effect, but there is definitely something dreamy and whimsical about shooting in 30 frames per second and slowing it down to 80. It is subtle, but it is definitely there and still has an impact on the video. So moving on to the last reason why 30 frames per second will benefit your gimbal work, and that is shooting in low light. Many of us often shoot in high frame rates like 60 or 120 frames per second because we like how it makes our footage look super smooth once it's slowed down. But the problem with this is that most cameras, with the exception of a few expensive ones, don't shoot in these higher frame rates in 4K. It's usually limited to 1080 or even 720p. And not only that, but when you shoot in these higher frame rates, you have no choice but to bump up your shutter speed to either 1/125 or 1/250 respectively. And because these higher shutter speeds make your exposure lower, you now have to crank your ISO to compensate for the low light setting, and this introduces a lot of noise to your footage. What's great about 30 frames per second is that it still smooths out your footage once you slow it down to 80%, and you can do this while using a much lower shutter speed like 1/60. This means you no longer have to crank your ISO, so you don't have as much noise, and since a lot of cameras nowadays let us shoot 30 frames per second in 4K, we can get beautiful high quality videos with minimal noise while still being nice and smooth. So that is it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed this tip or found it helpful, then make sure you hit this video with a thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.